making out a list tonight of things that will not change, of promises to lean upon when this whole world feels strange. Like you will always be beloved wherever you should roam, and there will always be a place here for you to call home, here for you to call home. I'm putting in a song for you, the things you cannot lose. You cannot lose your chosenness, no matter what you choose. This love cannot be left behind, despite your wandering. And so you know I'm keeping here your sandals, robe, and ring, your sandals, robe, and ring.
Grace has this way of embracing and disarming us at the same time. Jesus is like that. Always, always gathering us in love, and at the very same time, getting past our defenses and helping us to see the things we didn't want to have to see. As many times as I have heard stories from the Bible, and some we tell over and over and over again, I always find myself brought up short to discover how Jesus keeps embracing and disarming me when I think he doesn't have any tricks up his sleeve anymore. Jesus embraces and disarms me. Even the stories I've heard a million times, like this one. And so the story goes that Jesus has made a habit of hanging out with all the wrong people. And as the narrator Luke tells it, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus tells this story in the 15th chapter of Luke. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would have gladly filled himself with the pods the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, and here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. And he ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and he came up and approached the house. He heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you have never even given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' And the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" Like I say, every time I read that story, it hits me. It hits me in a different place sometimes every time I hear it. Maybe you too. I think that's part of the beauty and the power of the way Jesus tells stories, especially one like this. That no matter where you are, it both disarms you and embraces you. Maybe over the course of your lifetime, at different moments, you found yourself resonating with different characters in the story. There are times when what we need to hear is that if we've been the wayward, lost son who's gone off and spat in the face of people who love us, or the grace of God, that God's grace hasn't given up on us. Sometimes we need to hear when we're the ones who have failed, or we're the ones who've blown it, or we're the ones who wandered off into the far country. You are beloved. You are beloved. You are beloved. And have all of our other hang-ups or our thoughts that going somewhere else could give us a better life, whatever, no, all those things could be stripped away. We are beloved, and that God's love never for a moment has given up on us. In fact, sometimes it is disarming to hear that God embraces us before we get our little memorized speeches out, our little religious, I'm sorry for sinning and I'll try to do better, I'll work real hard. Before we get those speeches out, that God's grace has embraced you and said, you never lost your belonging. You never lost your belovedness. You never lost your chosenness. That's one of the powerful and unsettling, I think, things about this story. The son who works up this speech, I'll go back and I'll try and cut a deal with Dad. I know I've certainly lost my belonging in the family as a son, but maybe he'll hire me, and maybe at least he'll have pity on me, and I can earn my way. I'll work for it. And the son doesn't even get to let his little speech out. His father wraps his arms around him before he can finish his proposed deal. Grace does that to us. Grace strips away all of our pretense at deal-making and earning. And God, I'll do this for you. I'll do this for you. I'll be so well-behaved. I'll pray. I'll go to church. I'll do all these things. None of those are necessary. The grace of God just wraps us up in arms and says, I love you. I love you. I love you. If you've ever been in that place where you weren't sure if love was for you, if you weren't sure if God's love is for you, Jesus tells this story for you. Yes, you are beloved, no matter what backstory you bring. You are beloved, and there is nothing you can do, nothing you have done, nothing you could do in the future to lose that belovedness. That brings me up short. And at the same time, there are times when this story hits me as lifelong churchgoer, as someone who likes to imagine himself decently well-behaved, and as literal older brother in the family I grew up in, and how often this story hits me when I become religious gatekeeper. How often we find ourselves, especially we church folk, right? People who would watch a video like this, people who gather in worship on Sundays, people who tell Jesus stories. We know these stories. We're church folk. We're well-behaved, right? And this story hits us right between the eyes and calls us out on all the times we've turned somebody else away for whatever reason we thought was reasonable, for whatever reason we thought somebody else wasn't good enough, didn't deserve God's love, or that we needed to control or limit or water down or constrain God's love, right? So often this story hits me because I've been the older brother who gets upset when Jesus' love includes people I don't think should be included, who get upset when Jesus' love is reckless and all-embracing, even people I don't particularly like. When we do that, when we set up these barriers, Jesus has a way of saying, I'm sorry, these are not barriers that I've set up. We have to welcome, we have to include, we have to celebrate, even if it's that wayward younger brother of yours. We had to celebrate. He was dead and he's come to life again. He was lost and now he's found. How dare we think it's ours to put limits on the reach of God's love, on the limits or conditions of God's grace? I imagine that older brother would have been fine if the father had said something like, well, I've hired your younger brother on in the household, and I'm going to be paying him as an employee, or he's going to have to earn his way back in by good behavior. But instead, this reckless arms reaching out to embrace him And to throw a party just because he shows up back at the door again, this upsets the older brother because he thinks there has to be a certain amount of suffering or repayment or earning or solid signs of repentance. And instead the father just says, I'm sorry, my love embraces you where you're at always. My love runs out to meet you where you're at. And as much as that older brother has to face the grace of his father when he doesn't want to admit it, the door is still open for the older brother too, right? The dad has come out, has gone out of his way, out of the house to welcome the older brother in as well. He's not written off as, sorry, you had your chance, you missed the party, now I'm done with you. The father holds out open hands to both of his sons. The younger one who's wandered off and wasted the inheritance. The older brother who's indignant and bitter about it as well. All of them are invited to the party. All of them belong. All of them always have. The older brother is disarmed when he comes face to face with his father's grace, but he's also embraced at the very same time. For us as church, this is what it is to be the people of God who come face to face with the story of Jesus, with the good news of the gospel week in and week out. It disarms us every time we set up boundaries and barriers and walls of who is not eligible, who cannot be included, who God's love is not really for. Jesus tells a story like this and says, I'm sorry, you've been welcomed when you were the wasteful, arrogant, younger son who wandered off, and you've been embraced. And grace is for you even when you are the bean-counting, stick-in-the-mud, bitter older brother as well. Love doesn't let go of either of the sons and doesn't let go of us even when we are older son and younger son at the same time. And the thing I think I love most of all in this particular hearing of this story is that setting, that context that Jesus gives. That this story is told as an answer to people complaining to Jesus that he's hanging out with all the wrong people. You know, all those lost people, all those sinner people. And he isn't even judging them. He isn't even telling them they're not worthy. He isn't even insisting about their repentance nor as a precondition for him sharing a table with them. He's just loving them. He's just accepting them. He's not even treating them like a them. He just gathers himself with anybody's and everybody's without any shame, without any condescension, without patronizing them or pitying them. He just surrounds himself with everybody. Jesus tells this story in response to religious people who have set up too many boundaries for who God's love can include. And so often we play that same game. Jesus tells this story both to embrace us, to say, look, you're not written off. I'm not giving up on you even though you completely missed the point. I'm still including you, even the respectable religious people there is room for at Jesus' table. But also Jesus disarms us and says, I'm going to keep throwing the parties I'm going to keep throwing. I'm going to keep surrounding myself with all the ones you think are not good enough and not acceptable. That's where Jesus keeps showing up. That's where God's reign keeps leading Jesus. So there's a space for you, but you're going to have to let go of all those rules and barriers and assumptions about who is not worthy to find a place at that table. Jesus disarms me and embraces me. And in the moments when I need to hear I'm beloved, he keeps saying that. And in the moments when I'm keeping somebody else out or telling somebody else they're not worthy, they're not acceptable, Jesus disarms me of the way I weaponize religion against him and against other people. Join us on Sunday. Join us this weekend for worship when this is the story we're going to be spending time in. And come not because you don't know how the story is going to end. You already know how it ends. It ends with embrace. It ends with open invitation. But come because this is how Jesus does his work on these hearts of ours. When we feel like we've been turned away and cast out, this story gathers us back in and says, you are beloved, you are beloved, you are beloved. If you know somebody who needs to hear that news, tell it to them. Gather with us and let's tell that news. And in all those places that we've been setting up barriers to God's love that God won't own, come and let Jesus come and dismantle them piece by piece, plank by plank, brick by brick, stone by stone. Come and gather with us on Sunday and find yourself embraced and disarmed by Jesus at the same time. See you Sunday.
I'm writing down a record here of things you can't outrun. These tired legs will not give out. no matter what you've done. And if you should decide to turn back to these things you knew, I won't be here just sitting still. I'm seeking after you, I'm seeking after you. I'm making out a list tonight of things I'll never say. I'll never say I'm done with you. Find somewhere else to stay. You'll never hear me say to you, that's too much to forgive. For you were lost, but now are found. We're dead, but now you live. We're dead, but now you live. I'm saying this so you will know and see it in my face. The only way I look at you is through the eyes of grace. Come join the party and rejoice with all this family, 'cause all I have belongs to you, and you belong